Jack Turner lived a life ruled by quiet repetition. As a single father raising his 7-year-old son Max, every moment was accounted for, every routine carefully maintained. After losing his wife 3 years ago in a tragic car accident, Jack had built a life of calm predictability, not for himself, but for Max's sake. Each evening followed the same path: pick Max up from aftercare, grab something for dinner, and head home for homework, cartoons, and bedtime stories. But that Thursday, a detour changed everything. Jack had just picked up groceries and was heading behind the store to dispose of some recyclables when he heard it, a soft, shaky whimper coming from behind the large commercial dumpster. He stopped, unsure if it was a cat or a wounded animal. Curious and cautious, he stepped closer, peering around the rusted metal. What he saw made his heart stutter. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, was huddled in the corner behind the dumpster, knees drawn tightly to her chest, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes wide with fear. Jack instinctively crouched down, lowering his voice. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked gently. She didn't answer, just flinched and pulled the blanket tighter. "I won't hurt you," he added quickly. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" After a long silence, her voice came out barely above a whisper, "Please don't call the police, they'll send me back." Jack's instincts as a father surged to the surface. This wasn't just a runaway or a prank. This girl was genuinely terrified, and not just of being caught. She was afraid of returning somewhere. That one broken sentence carried a lifetime of pain. He handed her a juice box from the back seat of his car and offered her Max's untouched granola bar. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out and took it. As she ate, Jack asked for her name. "Ellie," she said between bites. That was all she gave. Jack didn't press. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the kind of fear that didn't come from a single bad night but from a long, unseen war. He didn't know where she came from, but as he watched her shiver in the cold, he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't leaving without her. Jack drove home in silence, glancing at Ellie through the rearview mirror as Max chattered innocently from the back seat, unaware of the depth of the situation. Ellie sat rigidly, clutching the blanket tighter, her wide eyes darting between the road and Jack. When they arrived, Max immediately pulled her inside and showed her his toy box like she was a guest from school. Ellie hesitated at the threshold, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to enter. Jack placed a gentle hand on her back and guided her in. "You're safe here," he said. "No one's going to hurt you." That night, Ellie slept curled up on the couch beneath a pile of Max's stuffed animals. Jack stayed awake in the kitchen, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. Questions flooded his mind. Where was she from? What exactly was she running from? Should he have gone to the police immediately? He'd always taught Max to do the right thing, to follow the rules, but this situation wasn't black and white. The fear in Ellie's voice when she begged him not to call the police rang louder than any logic. In the morning, Jack called Sarah, an old friend who now worked as a social worker. Without revealing Ellie's identity, he asked what would happen if a child ran away from foster care. Sarah's answer was sobering. If she's scared of going back, it's probably for a reason. Some of those homes look good on paper but are a nightmare behind closed doors. If she says it's bad, believe her. Jack made Ellie pancakes, her first hot meal in what seemed like days. Slowly, she began to trust him. She never spoke in full detail, but little by little, she dropped fragments: a woman who yelled, a man with heavy footsteps, locks on the fridge. Jack didn't push, but every word tore at him. No child should have to endure that. Max, in his innocence, simply accepted Ellie. They built Lego towers together, played board games, and drew pictures of dinosaurs. Jack watched as the fear in Ellie's eyes softened, replaced by brief moments of wonder. He didn't know what came next, but one thing was clear: Ellie had found a place where she could breathe. And Jack, once so focused on protecting his own child, now felt the unmistakable stirrings of needing to protect another. Over the next few days, Ellie began to show glimpses of the child she must have once been. She laughed with Max while they built a makeshift fort in the living room. She drew colorful crayon pictures of flowers and stars. But at night, Jack could still hear the nightmares. Ellie would whimper in her sleep, sometimes crying out, "Don't lock me in again," or, "Please, I won't tell anyone." Jack's heart shattered each time. He knew it was time to dig deeper, not just to understand what she'd been through, but to make sure no other child was enduring the same. He called Sarah again, this time giving her Ellie's first name and approximate age. Sarah promised to look into it quietly, aware of the risk Jack was taking by harboring a runaway child. 2 days later, she called back, her voice heavy. "Jack, I found her." Ellie was placed in a foster home that's had multiple complaints. 2 other kids were pulled from their last year, but somehow the home passed their next inspection. "I'm trying to find out how." Jack clenched his jaw. "How is this happening? How is a child like Ellie still stuck in that system?" Sarah sighed. "Because it's broken. And no one listens until someone screams loud enough." Jack decided to scream. He began documenting everything, Ellie's bruises, her stories, the evidence of trauma. With Sarah's help, they contacted a trusted reporter who had previously covered failures in child services. Within days, the story broke. Young girl flees abusive foster home, taken in by stranger who refuses to stay silent. The article went viral. Jack's phone rang non-stop, some praising him, others warning him he'd broken the law. But Jack didn't care. Ellie's safety mattered more than public opinion or red tape. When Child Protective Services finally visited his home, Jack stood his ground. "You're not taking her back there. You'll have to drag me out in handcuffs." But something had changed. Public pressure, news coverage, and Sarah's internal push had sparked an official investigation. The abusive foster home was shut down, and the couple who ran it were arrested. Ellie, for the first time, wasn't just a forgotten file in the system. She was seen. And she was protected. Jack looked at her one evening as she sat beside Max, both of them giggling over a silly cartoon, and realized, he hadn't just saved her. She'd changed him, too. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of court dates, interviews, and emotional highs and lows. Jack stood in front of judges, answered social workers' questions, and faced lawyers who warned him that harboring a runaway, even with good intentions, was a legal risk. But Jack never wavered. He looked every official in the eye and said, "I'd do it again. 100 times over." Ellie remained at his side through it all, holding his hand in courtrooms and during long waiting room hours, her eyes no longer filled with constant fear, but something new, hope. Sarah became their strongest advocate, testifying that Jack had not only given Ellie a safe home but had uncovered cracks in a system that had let her fall through. The media storm around the story didn't die down. In fact, it fueled public outrage and calls for reform in foster care protocols. More people came forward, other kids who had suffered in silence, parents who had lost faith in the system. Jack hadn't planned to be the face of a cause, but somehow, he was. And in the middle of it all, there was Ellie, slowly becoming part of their family. Max began calling her "my sister" without even thinking about it. Jack would catch her humming in the mornings, packing her school bag next to Max's. The once quiet girl who had sobbed behind a dumpster was now asking for seconds at dinner and racing through the yard with the wind in her hair. The trauma hadn't disappeared, but something stronger had taken root, belonging. The final court hearing came with heavy anticipation. Jack had filed for legal guardianship, knowing there would be scrutiny. But when the judge looked down at Ellie and asked, "Do you want to stay with Mr. Turner?" she didn't hesitate. "He's my dad," she said simply, her voice steady. Jack's throat tightened, and for the first time since his wife's death, tears filled his eyes, not from grief, but gratitude. That evening, after the paperwork was signed, they returned home to a banner Max had made with crayons, "Welcome home, Ellie." As Jack tucked both children into bed, Ellie wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." Jack kissed her forehead and replied, "No, sweetheart, thank you for finding me, too.